Hello. Hey, welcome to History Chats this afternoon. Yeah, I think everything looks like it's ready to go, so we're gonna jump in. Continuing our theme of people you should know, Gary is gonna take us through the history of a particular person that you should know, and I'll transfer it over, let him take it from here.
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Ben said, we're talking about people you should know, and of course, in history, it's the people that generate the history, and we will be looking at one person who I feel sort of demonstrates a little bit of Marathon County history, as well as Wisconsin history, as well as a little bit of national history for us today. We're going to be talking about Gerald Boileau, I think a very fascinating person. And the story of Gerald Boileau is a little bit complicated, and we're going to be speaking mostly to the early years of his involvement in politics in Marathon County and Wisconsin. But underlying all that, we know that we've been talking about the 1920s into the 1930s for a long time. If you've been watching History Chats, you know that that is one of our constant themes, and one of the constant themes of Gerald Boileau is the politics of the 1920s and the 1930s. And the politics of the 1920s and 1930s in Wisconsin is Robert La Follette. And of course, his two sons, Phil and Bob Jr. But the progressive wave that Bob La Follette brought into Wisconsin when he was governor and senator keeps going into the 1920s. We may not think of that. We may not think of that era as a great progressive decade, but it really was. There was a variety of things. The 1922 election in Wisconsin, Bob La Follette's 1924 run for the presidency, all those contribute to the lingering theme of progressivism and reform in Wisconsin. So with that background, and I think that's very important that that theme is continually running through Wisconsin politics. And La Follette progressivism is one of those themes, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But just so that you know that that constant stream of progressivism is going on into the 1920s. So a little bit about Mr. Boileau. Born in 1900 up in Minocqua, World War I veteran. He was with the American Expeditionary Force in France. Graduated, came back, graduated Marquette University Law School. Eventually found his way back to, or came up to Marathon County, I should say, 1923. We'll talk a little bit about that. 1926, elected district attorney unto himself. Then in the 1930s, he started to run for Congress, specifically in 1930, and then his progressive wave while he was congressman. And then, of course, in 1938, he lost, began law practice, circuit court judge, retired as that in 1970. He died in 1981 at the age of 81. So that is a little bit of a brief summary, and we'll, of course, pay more attention to some of these aspects as we go on. Like I said, he graduated from Minocqua, joined World War I with the expeditionary force into France. I came back, and he was, throughout his career, he was very, he joined the American Legion. He was a very important part of the veterans organizations in Marathon County after World War I. He really felt a strong attachment to that group. Of course, the American Legion was formed after World War I. So he became a big part of that as he came back via Marquette and eventually back to Wausau. So he came back to Wausau. He came as an assistant district attorney, working in this very courthouse in the 1920s. After graduating Marquette Law School, he came to Wausau, assistant district attorney, under George Lippert. Of course, we realize this is the 1920s now, so again, a lot of prohibition activity going on. George Lippert left the office of district attorney, and then Mr. Boileau succeeded him as a district attorney, and then he eventually won the seat unto himself in 1926. So George Boileau was very active in local county politics at this time, so that he became, it seems like we don't really have a sense of his early politics. We know that as soon as he came into Marathon County as district attorney, I think he saw an allegiance to the progressive wing of the Republican Party, but we don't really know how he came upon that. But he was, and eventually his involvement with the Republican Party in the Wisconsin was that he went to the 1928 Republican Party convention in Kansas City. You see Mr. Boileau there, and then over on your extreme left, Governor La Follette was also in this picture. So Mr. Boileau, key player in the Republican Party at this time, Marathon County, very active. His activities in the party very active, that he was chosen, in fact, to go to the Republican National Convention. All of his political activity soon brought him into running for Congress in 1930. And then, as the article mentions, I propose to present my candidacy with frank discussion of the vital questions confronting us at the present time. And remember that this is 1930. We're well into the Great Depression. As he says in his announcement, he says, I'm unmindful of the great economic questions continually coming before Congress, and I pledge my support to such legislation as will remedy conditions among the farmers and laborers. He had, I think, a strong connection to the farmer and agricultural voice in Marathon County and in Wisconsin, and I think that this will show his allegiance as well as great interest in the farm economy of Marathon County as well as this congressional district. So he starts the campaign. Honesty in politics. This is one of his election advertisements. And then he goes on to explain why he wants the voters of Marathon County to vote for him here in 1930. Again, he seems to have been developing a strong cadre of followers. The Boileau for Congress club membership committee is detailed on the bottom of this ad. Again, he seems to be gathering great popularity, not only in Wausau, Marathon County, as well as in this congressional district. Also in 1930, right after he announced, the local Republican newspaper, the Wausau Record-Herald, talks about Mr. Boileau's run for the Republican nomination for a representative in Congress, 8th District. It has been known for many months that Mr. Boileau's congressional aspirations announcement is the first to appear in this district, although it is generally understood that Representative Edward Brown will not seek another term in the House. The candidacy of Mr. Boileau opens an interesting situation. He is a young, ardent supporter of the La Follette cause, and his announcement shows his ties with Senator Blaine himself and devoted to the efforts, pay attention here, to the efforts to bring beer back to Wisconsin. So Mr. Boileau in his campaign made it very well known that he was wet, that he was against the Prohibition Amendment, and I think that was one of the reasons why Mr. Boileau won this election in 1930. So again, so he continues to run. In 1932, he was continued to run as a Republican. Again, in 1932, we see the beginning of Franklin Roosevelt's presidency, and a very important election at that time. So the wave of the nation started to turn, and in 32, there was this statement that 2 years I campaigned on a wet platform, and in Congress I did everything possible to bring about the repeal of the 18th Amendment and to modify the Volstead Act. I believe the next Congress will be the most encouraging for the wets. And of course, indeed it was. Mr. Boileau said he voted for relief of the nation's needy by favoring the giving of millions of bushels of wheat, so that we see in this article, again, what Mr. Boileau was really after somewhat reform, knowing the Great Depression was in front of us. We knew that relief had to come in a variety of different ways. So here's Mr. Boileau. Again, he became a very active part of the Roosevelt administration. He became a very well-known congressman, even on the national stage. But in 1934, the beginning again a resurgence of the Progressive Party in Wisconsin. So in 34, Mr. Boileau ran on the Progressive Party ticket for Congress, and he won. He won that seat in 1934 while the Democrats and the Republicans ran their own candidates. Mr. Boileau ran on the Progressive Party and won in 1934. Again, we see the great influence of Bob La Follette coming, even though he died in 1925. The influence of the La Follettes in American politics and in Wisconsin politics is still very evident. And as sort of a different as sort of a wing of the Republican Party as such, but still a separate voice of progressive politics in the 1930s. And then here we see Governor Philip La Follette coming into Wisconsin, into Wausau, in fact, at a progressive party. So again, starting to create a separate voice for progressive politics in Marathon County as well as Wisconsin. And then in 1934, of course, he was reelected to Congress very well. The article says Congressman Boylan progressive record with 38,000 votes, and then comparing him to the other two candidates that were running on the Republican and the Democratic Party ticket. One of the lingering effects that, like I said before, was Mr. Boileau's dealing with agriculture and especially the advancement of the Agricultural Adjustment Act as a possible cure. So bringing some relief to farmers and the agricultural community throughout the nation. And Mr. Boileau was heavily involved with those dairy policies, especially as it reflected in Wisconsin, this dairy state. So again, continuing in 1934, he talks about the legislative trends that are starting to go on, especially the article talks about the National Recovery Act and what that is going to be doing for businessmen and the country itself. And so he was always here. He was always speaking to local groups. He was very involved with a variety of civic groups, not only in Wausau, Marathon County, but throughout his congressional district. I think he really was trying to get a sense of what the Great Depression meant, as well as what the recovery could mean for the citizens of Wisconsin. And then he, like I said before, he was so influential in Congress that in 1935 he was progressive will support Boileau for floor leader. He became floor leader of the progressive wing in Congress in 1935. This is a picture of Fiorello LaGuardia, mayor of New York. And when he was in Congress at this time, and when he stepped down to become mayor of New York, Mr. Boileau succeeded him as floor leader. So again, we see Mr. Boileau's allegiance to people like Mayor LaGuardia, progressives, reform-minded people, really dramatic and influential people in the 1930s. Here he is again. Mr. LaGuardia did in fact visit Wausau at one time, and here he is with Mr. Boileau as well as with the mayor, I think, Mayor Polster. So again, very influential, bringing LaGuardia into Wausau, a big part of Mr. Boileau's influence on the national scene. Again, the dairy bloc led by Boileau changed his House Farm measure, his constant working with the farm and agricultural legislation that was going on in the House of Representatives. Again, a picture of an agricultural committee dealing with the Agricultural Act during the New Deal. Again, through all this, a constant allegiance to the Progressive Party. Here he is with Mr. La Follette. I think this is Philip La Follette. Again, really working side by side in the progressive tradition of Wisconsin. And here he is back in Wausau, Marathon County in 1938. Mr. Leffler, who became, I believe, mayor, or maybe a district attorney here in Marathon Park. But then in 1938, things were starting to change already for the nation's politics. And Mr. Boileau was defeated by Reed Murray for his reelection in 1938. Again, a lot of different politics were at play. A lot of agricultural infighting was going on with regard to the national agricultural legislation, and Boileau lost his run for his congressional seat in 1938. But he came back to Wausau. He eventually, like I said earlier, he became a judge, a circuit court judge, pretty much, I think, through a good part of his life. I think he retired I forget when he did retire. I think in the early 1970s. But again, this is a photo of Mr. Boileau, Judge Boileau, in front of his portrait in the courthouse. So again, he lived the rest of his life after 1938 as a judge here in Marathon County, quite respected, very much of a legal mind, carrying forth his progressive and reform measures, I'm sure, through his judgeship. And again, he was so respected as a jurist and a congressman. Marathon County, I'm sorry, the Wausau Park system has this baseball diamond in his memory in back of Athletic Park. So again, he continues to be an influential person in Wausau, really a person who spans many decades. But of course, what I really wanted to concentrate on today was a little bit, in 15 or 20 minutes, a little bit of his early 1920s, 1930s role as a district attorney, as well as a congressman, ending his term in 1938. But whenever we talk about Gerald Boileau, we should also be talking about the historian James Lawrence. Did his book on Gerald Boileau, and the Progressive Farmer Labor Alliance, the Politics of the New Deal. And Jim Lawrence, also with Howard Cleater, wrote their history of Marathon County in the 1920s, Woodlot and Ballot Box. Again, and Mr. Boileau's papers are at the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point Archives. Again, a fascinating person. One of, as I said in the beginning, the people play a big part in our history, and Gerald Boileau was one of those significant people in Marathon County, as well as in the 8th Congressional District, playing a large role in the politics of the 1920s and 1930s. Mr. Boileau is only one of 3 congressmen from Wausau that were elected. Mr. McIndoe, Mr. Boileau, of course, and then of course David Obey was also sent to Congress from Wausau. So again, with that, a little bit of a story of Gerald Boileau and his significance in the history of Marathon County. So with that, I'll turn it back to Ben.
All right. Yeah. So there you go. There's another person that now you know about, and you should. We have one more week here in the month. So let's see here. Brings us to what do our volunteers know? So I think the plan here is we'll see how it comes out, but we'll have some of our volunteers who are very knowledgeable about the community, and we'll show them some pictures and do see if they can figure out who the people are, which should be kind of a fun process. So yeah, we'll continue on with more history chats as always in the future, and I think that probably covers it. Thanks so much for watching, as always, and we will see you next week for some more history chats.